everyone, my name is Anastasia. I'm a social psychologist and researcher from Moscow, Russia. I must say it's a great pleasure for me to be the part of the event today representing my paper. So the topic I would like to discuss today is 360-degree feedback and its psychological effects. To make my report less complicated, I will use the term the feedback.
The feedback is one of the most widely spread tools for making estimates of how an employee or even the whole organization is performing. Being introduced in the late 80s, this approach has received positive esteem by managers and multiple reviews in scientific papers. However, these documents mostly cover the questions of its effectiveness for the manager and the company overall, without stressing the facts of its impact on the psychological condition of the receiver.
Therefore, the goal of this presentation is to make a review of different sources of information so that to concentrate on psychological effects of the feedback. Moreover, it was found that experience of using the feedback is strongly correlated with cultural differences. For instance, in Russian practice, this approach is being used for making the best the worst rating, while in the other countries, managers tend to follow the original goal of the approach and use it for targeted development of management structures. Therefore, the retreat resources for the current research contain multiple components overviewing experience of different countries. Novelty of the research is being represented by two components. First, concentration on psychological aspects which lead to mental health of the participants, in contrast to the studies being concentrated on the questions of its practical effects for the company. Second, highlighting cultural aspects in order to make the whole procedure safer. Practical contribution of the research is supposed to be viewed in three areas. Area 1. The findings allow managers to avoid mistake while using the feedback, so that the tool would not be harmful for the participants and could be effective for the company. Area 2. The findings select the participants of the feedback to view it as an experiment which is aimed to their personal growth, so that they can receive maximum of benefits and minimize such negative effects as an anxiety. Area 3. The findings can be useful for the managers which are working in foreign companies or with the foreigners. They receive an opportunity to view how the process is being organized in other countries.
Let's have a small overview of theory so that to go deeper in the question of the feedback and understand all items connected with it.
The feedback system was introduced in 1987. The term itself was retrieved from US military institutions, where it had a meaning of checking the pilots before taking off. The whole system was originally built on the basis of combining employee attitude survey, performance appraisal, and personal development plans, and assessment centers. Later, it was developed by Marshall Goldsmiths and introduced into American business sphere by the end of 20th century, gradually appearing in the other countries. Thus, the feedback has been being used in Russia since the beginning of 20th century.
The feedback system is determined as a feedback process which involves collecting perceptions about person's behavior and the impact of that behavior. This data is received from different sources of information which have a connection to the person's colleagues, managers, subordinates. Therefore, the system is called multi-source assessment as well. Other people who have an interest but not a strong connection to the person, such as internal and external customers, can be added to the system. Then 360-degree turns into 540-degree feedback system.
The feedback system became widely spread soon after the implementation. The success is explained by its unique character, which allows mixing benefits of feedback and performance evaluation. Despite the popularity, some of the experts claim that the system refers to such sphere where practice is well ahead of theory and empirical research. Let's talk about positive effects of the feedback and their limitations. The first positive effect: improvement in the areas which lack of competence. The feedback system is aimed to providing the person with introspective look so that he will be able to adapt. It is extremely important in the areas where the person has lack of competence. The effectiveness of the system in this meaning is confirmed by empirical studies. For instance, 1/3 of the participants of multi-institutional quality improvement project reported in the end that they had observed visible improvement in professional behavior. The same effectiveness was shown by nursing program students who reported that they made intentional efforts to improve. This goes along with other studies which concluded that observer ratings were more valuable than self-ratings when predicting intention to build own business. It is necessary to underline that even those people who do not agree with estimate consider feedback to be useful for the future. Let's talk about the limitations of these positive effects. While the feedback should be aimed to highlight the personal responsibility and opportunities for growth, Russian practice shows opposite reality, in which HR managers remain to be the main people who take decisions regarding the progress of the company. In Russia, this approach is being used mainly for making decisions regarding job positions. Thus, when managers receive non-positive results, they tend to make urgent decisions without giving the candidate the chance of improvement. Second positive effect: feeling of justice in addition to personal achievements. The feedback system affects on positive relationships. For example, the researchers found that the system had an impact on the quality of the physician-patient relationship. The same conclusion was highlighted in the research based on the estimates of the leaders. They received favorable ratings from both their subordinates and their peers. These findings are consequent with the proved hypothesis that the system leads to the feeling of justice, which allows the employees to react properly in the terms of rating. This positive outcome leads to beneficial estimate of the whole system by both raters and receivers. For instance, all the participants of multi-institutional quality improvement project, surgeon participants, reviews, and department heads showed their interest in the same future research. Their reported estimate was preferable, but still unpredictable for the researchers, as they had concerns regarding fatigue and the amount of time necessary for the implementation of the system.
Now let's proceed to negative effects of the feedback. Number 1. Risks of anxiety.
Such risks as fatigue and time pressure were reported by all researchers whose empirical studies were included in this overview. It was concluded that the process of incorporating this system requires 2-3 years. During this period, facing some resistance is common, but it is helpful in reducing anxiety. What is important to point out regarding anxiety is the fact that in Russian practice, this approach is literally called 360-degree estimate, in contrast to more loyal version feedback. Therefore, the name itself may cause raise of anxiety of the participants. Number 2. Necessity of anonymous format. To avoid anxiety, experts highly recommend making the system work anonymously and preferably online. Russian researchers tend to share this statement, underlying the fact that if there is non-anonymous format, the receiver suffers personally, while the company suffers from the results of the whole procedure, which tend to be not valid.
Number 3. Risks of fatigue. In order to decrease fatigue for researchers, it is extremely important to explain in advance the goal of feedback collecting and future use of it. Otherwise, the implementation of the system will potentially cause costly error. For instance, sport coaches valued the system more when they considered feedback system to be an opportunity for their own development rather than support of their dismissal. Number 4. Reduced value of the feedback. The most valuable risk concerns raters, their qualifications, and relationship with the receiver. More specified, receiver chooses those rater who is close to him and who likes him. Otherwise, the receiver can reduce the value of the feedback. It also may happen if he considers the rater to have lower level of qualification. Residents devalued non-physicians and didn't consider them to be a part of medical team. Secondly, it was found that the receivers who get high scores from their feedback are not really high performers. Number 5. Subjectivity. The previous point gives us an opportunity to claim that the feedback system is quite subjective. That is why it is usually used in pair with other tools, for instance, training courses. The subjectivity of the system also affects on the sphere where the results can be used. Number 6. Data skewness regarding questions of salary and job position. While it is effective for professional development, it is harmful for the questions about salary and job position, as the desire to help the receiver, or opposite, causes data skewness. Instead of the feedback system, it is highly recommended to use a certification procedure. Russian researchers follow the same line and do not recommend to use the feedback for the questions of salary, underlying subjectivity of this approach. However, there is a bunch of studies describing the results of using the feedback to clarify the financial component. Now we are eager to pass to the conclusion. To summarize the ideas, the feedback system has a line of positive outcomes. This is proven both by 30 years history and the results of empirical studies which are overviewed in this research. However, there are important factors which should be taken into consideration while incorporating this system. First of them is cultural aspect, but also organizational issues, such as giving the receivers proper information, using methods to reduce subjectivity, and taking into consideration the question of time. When these recommendations are followed, the feedback system becomes an extremely useful tool.
So now we came to the end of this presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I do so hope that my presentation was somehow helpful for you, and I'm looking forward to see you again in the future. Thank you.